Hello, everybody, and welcome back to the Recovery Zone. I want to thank everybody for your continued support. And we are building our amazing community and helping others, and that's the whole reason to start the Recovery Zone. Tonight, I have a very special guest, and I'm really thankful that he took the time to meet with us. This is Jason Snyder, and he's from Pinnacle Treatment Center. And thank you, Jason, for taking the time tonight with us.
Oh, you're welcome. You're welcome, Christine. My pleasure to be here.
And Jason has an amazing story, and it's just a story of, the fight of the human spirit and resilience. And I'm so grateful to hear his story tonight. So I just really think that you'll connect with Jason's story, and you might hear a little bit of your story in there. Jason, so tell us a little bit about your background.
Sure. So today I work for Pinnacle Treatment Centers, as you had said, Christine. My title is Director of Strategic Partnerships, which essentially means that I work in the communities across Pennsylvania where we provide treatment services to potential partners like health systems or the criminal justice system, anyone who might come into contact with folks who could use the services that we provide. The conversation is, how can we work more effectively together? How can we provide to you those services that those folks you're providing services for need? How can we create efficient, effective processes to make sure that barriers are removed and that people can access treatment? That's really what my role is today. Prior to coming to work for Pinnacle, I had worked for the governor of Pennsylvania in the administration, first as a communications director for the State Department of Drug and Alcohol Programs, and then as a special assistant to the Secretary of the Department of Human Services, where I oversaw an initiative to expand access to evidence-based treatment for opioid use disorder, namely medication. So expanding access to medication-assisted treatment was what I worked on in that role. So that's in a nutshell what I've been up to the last couple of years.
Fantastic. And you mentioned the opioid treatment. It is really just vital that we concentrate on that right now. As you know, we have an opioid crisis, a complete epidemic that's going on in our country, and it's hitting Middle America. It's hitting poverty-stricken areas. It's hitting every aspect of our country. People will go in, say, for just a minor surgery, and unfortunately they come out and they can be addicted to opioid drugs. And what I'm really grateful for is that you're really focusing on that, and it's just so needed.
Absolutely. And Pinnacle Treatment Centers provide services in 8 states across the country. We have about 115 facilities across those 8 states. About 85 of those are considered opioid treatment programs, OTPs. And so our sole focus in those OTPs is to treat the person with an opioid use disorder with a medication, as well as counseling, predominantly methadone, but also we use buprenorphine and naltrexone as part of our mix to treat our folks with opioid use disorder. But far and away, of the 32,000 patients we treat on a daily basis, the majority of them are treated with methadone and counseling. In Pennsylvania, where I live, we have been hit particularly hard by the opioid overdose death epidemic, which really started to get attention by the government and by the media probably in about 2016. In 2017, we saw a peak number of overdose deaths in Pennsylvania, more than we had ever seen. In 18, we saw an almost 20% reduction in the number of deaths in Pennsylvania. In 19, we saw another slight decrease, but now in 2020, with COVID and the pandemic, we know that overdose deaths are up everywhere. And so as our CEO, Joe Pritchard, often says, we are as addiction treatment providers battling an epidemic within a pandemic. And so you're right. To focus on opioid use disorder is something critically needed, not only in Pennsylvania, but across the country.
It definitely is. And, I just did, my last podcast was the opioid crisis and the benefits of Narcan, and also, just the signs and symptoms of somebody overdosing. And what I did state to people is, this is happening so much in our country, it would be good for you to carry Narcan because you could save a life.
Absolutely.
And you do the the MAT program. Can you talk about that more and explain what it is and the benefits of it?
Sure, absolutely. So MAT, medication-assisted treatment, or sometimes we even refer to it as medications for opioid use disorder, MOUD, whichever acronym you use. We know that medication is the gold standard for treating someone with an opioid addiction. Medication coupled with counseling gives us our best outcomes in terms of getting somebody onto a path of long-term recovery. The two most effective medications are methadone and buprenorphine. Many of your viewers will know buprenorphine by the brand name Suboxone.
Right.
Methadone has been around since the 40s, and so there are decades of research supporting the effectiveness of methadone. Methadone is administered to our patients, generally speaking, on a daily basis. They come to the facility on a daily basis to get their medication. Although the longer they stay in treatment with us, the more opportunities they have to take medication home with them. And part of our treatment as well is the complementary counseling, as I would call it, individual and group counseling that is so critical for all of our patients. The methadone helps, as well as the Suboxone, to really begin to normalize brain function. In other words, what patients often tell me is that by using a medication, the obsession that they had felt for so long in needing to get to their next use, the total obsession that they have with using is quickly eliminated when we use that medication. And in helping to relieve them of that obsession, we enable them to focus on the therapeutic piece of treatment, which allows them to start to address the many other psychosocial issues that they need to address in order to continue to recover.
Right. And what I do know of buprenorphine is it helps with cravings.
Absolutely.
Which in turn helps with triggers for people. So, and do you believe that medication-assisted treatment is good for long-term use?
I think that it's really an individualized. It should be approached on an individual basis, I would say, Christine. Right. The vast majority of our patients will titrate off of their medication within a couple of years. Now, there are some patients who may stay on it longer term, and I think that is certainly fine for them. It's a decision that should be made in consultation with a physician as well as the clinical team. There, in my opinion and in my mind, we would be foolish to rush somebody to stop taking a medication that is keeping them alive and helping them to recover and meet their personal responsibilities and be productive members of society. We wouldn't rush somebody off of any other type of medication that's allowing them to do those things. So we should not be shaming or telling people who are using a medication to treat their disease that they're not really in recovery. It's a problem that I encounter on a daily basis.
Right.
And in the end, it's very harmful. And so again, it should be looked at on an individual basis.
And I agree with you. I used to run a Pills Anonymous meeting, which is like Alcoholics Anonymous or Narcotics Anonymous. And I would never turn somebody away that was on being treated with Suboxone. And I don't believe in that. I believe that they are in recovery. And it's a different form of recovery, but it does help. And so I wanted to talk to you about that. What do you think? Do you think there's a stigma surrounding that? And what can we do to change people's thought process on that?
Sure. Well, there's no question that there is a huge stigma around medication to treat opioid use disorder. Not only is there a stigma within society at large, but the criminal justice system holds a stigma against medication. The healthcare system, in many ways, stigmatizes medication. And unfortunately, the addiction treatment system itself is a significant perpetuator of stigma against medication. There are plenty of treatment facilities, treatment providers, from top level executives down to the frontline staff in plenty of addiction treatment facilities who maintain the philosophy that if you are not abstinent from everything, including those medications, you're not truly in recovery. And so absolutely, there's stigma across the board. There's a lot of different things we can do, Christine, but I think one of the most powerful things, and research will support this, and my own personal experience supports this as well, is having those folks who have found recovery, who have been successful in recovery through the use of medication as part of their treatment plan. We need those folks to come forward, share their stories, and be the proof, so to speak, be the demonstration that medication coupled with counseling does work. Now, the problem there is the very stigma we are asking them to help us reduce will prevent them from stepping forward because they don't want to lose their job. They don't want to lose their housing if they rent. They don't want their neighbors to all of a sudden withdraw from them. And so it's a very delicate balance that these patients are trying to find. But certainly, I think that kind of testimonial is one of the most powerful ways to overcome stigma.
Right. And I will share this because I believe our listeners need to hear something like this, something positive. So in early recovery, I actually was dependent and addicted on opioids. And what happened is I did go into treatment, medication-assisted treatment, and I found long-term sobriety due to that. Now, we talked about cravings. The cravings went away for me, which in turn helped all my triggers. And it was able for me to get stabilized in my recovery and to be able to, get that person back that I knew I could be one day again. Now, today, I celebrate 14 years of sobriety. And I want our listeners to know that. I think it's important that we share our story and we share our truth and that we speak it loud and proud. And I'm proud of this, and I'm proud that this is a part of my story. I share that in my book, The Struggle Became My Strength, because I really believe that it's a powerful tool to let others know they should not be ashamed. They should not feel that they're not in treatment or in recovery if they are, getting assisted with this medication. It is a very, very successful form of treatment. So I want our listeners to know that that is a part of my story, and I'm extremely proud to say that today.
Well, let me congratulate you on your 14 years. It's a fantastic accomplishment, and I admire you and respect you for your willingness to share that story. And you're right. Our experience with our own patients tells us that when they use medication, they are going to stay in treatment with us longer, whereas the absence of that medication many times, oftentimes, results in our patients leaving treatment early, addiction treatment patients not remaining engaged in treatment. And the problem with that is if someone leaves treatment early, if someone goes through withdrawal management or detox, as we traditionally call it, especially from an opioid, and 7 days later goes back out onto the street and decides to use again, especially if they are a heroin user. With the fentanyl that is on the street today, they are at enormous risk for death. And so we know that the use of medication keeps people engaged in treatment longer, and the longer somebody's engaged in treatment, the greater their chance for long-term recovery. The other benefits of medication you've already mentioned. Diminished cravings and ability to focus on the other things that are important besides the obsessive thoughts of using, and also the protection against overdose death, particularly from fentanyl, which has infiltrated the drug supply and our communities.
Honestly, it has changed everything, hasn't it?
Absolutely.
It really has. You know what our listeners, I want them to know is it takes a little bit, and this is an individual thing. Everybody's journey and everybody's recovery is different, as everyone's body is different.
Sure.
It takes a little bit for a client to get stabilized. And the thing is, what I'm really excited about now that treatment is doing, we are, helping. The insurances now are on board for co-occurring disorders, because it's difficult because you got to get someone stabilized with the addiction, and then getting someone stabilized with the co-occurring disorder. So it takes longer than 30, 60, or 90 days to do that. And they're starting to get on board with that, which I'm really grateful for. But like I said, everybody's recovery is going to be different. But then you get to be able to, like you said, get the concentration back, which you're able to, dig and get the bigger part of, like, why am I using in the first place? My behaviors, addictive behaviors, and all the things that come with it. Then you're able to really treat the client. And you get that ability with the Suboxone treatment. So I'm
Absolutely.
just so grateful that there's Pinnacle Treatment Centers that are, they're realizing this. They are realizing the importance of helping those with this crisis. You guys are really, really helping so much. And I'm just so grateful, to be able to speak to you about this tonight. It's just an amazing thing that you're doing.
Well, I appreciate that. And I appreciate the opportunity. And really, we look at ourselves as being privileged to be able to do the work that we do and to help heal individuals and their communities. I'm privileged to be able to do the work I do. Of course, I have a story of recovery as well. And if not for my experience and the experience of my family with the disease of addiction, I'm not sitting here with you today. The possibilities of where I might be are many, and one of those could in fact be death, because we know this is a very serious life or death matter. Fortunately for me, almost 9 years ago, I found recovery through both a 12-step fellowship and treatment. But unfortunately for me, my family has known the death that comes along oftentimes with addiction as well. And so, I'm privileged and grateful to be here and to be able to carry a message. And I recognize how fortunate I am to be able to do those things.
Well, and I, like you, I feel so fortunate. It is a real surreal moment to even be here, isn't it? And
it is, especially sometimes I reflect on my story and on my family's story, and I'll give you a very brief version of it. I am a lifelong Pennsylvanian. I was born and raised in Pennsylvania, the oldest of three boys, two parents who are still married to each other after 49 years. And my parents gave us a great upbringing. My dad was a blue collar worker. My mother was a stay-at-home mother, and my parents gave us everything we needed, most things we wanted. And so I believe the vision that my parents had for their three boys was that each would grow up, become successful in their own way, and start their own family. And that's what my parents were doing for us, giving us that foundation and that start in life that would enable us to do those things. But it just didn't work out that way. Despite everything that my parents had done for us, and despite the upbringing that we had, addiction, for all intents and purposes, really destroyed our family. In 2005, my brother Josh, in 2005, my brother Todd, at age 28, died of a heroin overdose. Todd left behind a daughter who was 6 years old at the time. In fact, today is Todd's birthday. Todd would be 43 years old today on December 2nd. Todd was a college graduate and had held some very good jobs in his brief life. But at 28, he was dead, and our family was certainly shocked. We had watched Todd spiral deeper into his addiction for quite some time. We knew death was a possibility, but because of the type of upbringing we had and the family that we were, I think we all thought that we were going to wake up from this nightmare at some point and it was going to be okay, but we never did, and Todd died January 24th, 2005. A little more than 2.5 years later, we were, as I often describe it, dismantled. This time on September 14th, 2007, my brother Josh, at age 25, was dead of a drug overdose. Josh's son was born exactly 2 months later on November 14th, 2007. And so his son obviously will never know Josh. And so with my brother's deaths, I was the last man standing, so to speak, the last living child of my parents, which made it all the more difficult for me in late 2011 to tell them that I was addicted to opioids as well and that I needed to go to treatment. And as I mentioned to you earlier, Christine, obviously, unfortunately for me, my story so far is much different than my brother's. And today I identify as a person in long-term recovery from the disease of addiction, which for me personally means I've not had a drink or drug in nearly 9 years. And it's because of that recovery that I've had the opportunities that I described to you at the top of the podcast, the opportunities I've been given to work in this arena, so to speak, to carry a message. You talked about how the opioid epidemic has hit really every segment of America. And, you know, part of my message is that addiction can and does affect anyone. And I think, you know, we oftentimes see stereotypical images of those addicts as the ignorant will describe them. But the picture of the back alley drug user, while in some instances accurate, is only a very small sliver of the picture. And so by telling my story, I hope to demonstrate that. I hope to use my brother's stories and my own, but especially my brother's, to if I can, move somebody to a point where they are ready for treatment, right, or connect with another family that has experienced a similar tragedy, a family that is locked up in shame and guilt because it's something that we all share. And so if I can use my brother's stories in a way to positively affect in those kinds of ways, then their deaths will not have had been completely in vain, and we will have memorialized them in a positive way. You talk about how it feels surreal to be here and how we are grateful to be here. I recognize that while I have a story of recovery, mine is somewhat garden variety, if you will. There are millions of us out there who have recovered. The thing I think that makes my story somewhat unique is that both of my brothers are dead. and that the last living child of my parents also battled an addiction. And so it's not lost on me that if not for the deaths of my brothers, I also probably wouldn't have this kind of opportunity. And so these things give me pause, but they also give me a mission,
Right.
and somewhat of an obligation, I would even say, Christine.
Well, Jason, I just want to say, first of all, I'm so sorry for your loss.
I appreciate that. Thank you.
And you hear from, you came from a good family, right? It doesn't have to be the genetic factor. My family had the addiction, so I had the addiction. That is someone's story. But it doesn't have to be, it hits every part of America. And
Sure.
And what does an addict look like? It's not the bum on the street. It's you and I. And if someone saw you in the grocery store, would they ever think that you had struggled? So we don't really know, the next person standing next to us, what they are struggling with.
Sure.
It's so important to be kind. We never know what that individual is going through. And
you're right about that. And I would say as well that our family, we had a good upbringing, and what a tragedy hit us. But the person whose addiction manifested from serious trauma as a child, or the individual who comes to this addiction in an effort to treat, as you mentioned earlier, a co-occurring issue. The individual who has struggled mightily since birth to survive given the circumstances he or she was born into. Every one of those individuals, regardless of background, race, where they came from, certainly we believe that they should have access to quality, evidence-based treatment. And so, while I oftentimes use my family story as an example of how this can happen to anyone, I don't want to diminish the many others who have experienced trauma and who have come to need treatment through other paths. Really, I think how we got here, while has some bearing on what we're trying to do in order to reduce stigma, how we got here, I think, is less important than what we're going to do for the individual who is here now and in need of our services.
That's exactly right. But I'll tell you what, by you sharing your truth tonight, you have touched so many lives. And honestly, I really do truly believe that you've saved lives tonight, by sharing that.
Well, if we have, and if I have, to the point about my brothers, then they're in their deaths, we will have found some positivity, and I appreciate the opportunity through your channel and the platform that you have, Christine, to carry this message.
Well, I feel truly blessed to speak to you tonight. I thank you so much, and I really know our listeners are going to get a lot from this podcast. Thank you so much, Jason, for joining us tonight and being a part of our family, the Recovery Zone family.
Well, I appreciate the invitation. It was my privilege and my honor. Thank you very much, Christine.
Thank you so much. Blessings.
All right. Good night.